Hello and welcome to this Philbert Flies review of MK Studio's Dublin airport add-on for Microsoft Flight Simulator. You join me here on approach to runway 28 left, and as always I'm starting with an approach to give you a look at the surrounding area and also the opportunity to gauge the performance of this scenery on my system, which is comprised of an i7-8700K processor, 32GB of RAM and a 1080 Ti graphics card. I'll let you watch the rest of the approach and the landing in peace, and I'll join you again at a gate. Then we'll have a good look around this airport in different weather and lighting conditions, and I'll finish up by giving you my opinions on it. Speak to you shortly. Welcome to Dublin. We're parked up here on stand 407 Centre, and I've requested the jetway, so we'll just have a look at how that connects to the aircraft to start off with. You'll notice that the jetway hood goes through the skin of the aircraft rather than stopping at it, which is a bit of a shame, but unless you're going to actively watch the jetway connect when you arrive from very close up, you probably won't notice it. The jetway itself is very nicely modelled, excellent level of detail and very high quality textures as well. If we move over to the jetway pier structure, the textures are slightly lower resolution. As we get closer, you'll notice that they are quite blurry if you get up close. Let's take a look at some of the buildings themselves. This is Pier 4, which extends out from Terminal 2. It is the pier that we parked at. You'll notice that these panels here are exactly the same as those on the jetway structure we had a look at. Now they are slightly blurry if you get really close, but as I pulled up in the aircraft I noticed no blurriness whatsoever, which to me means that the textures used are high enough resolution. The modelling outside the terminal is really good. I love this sort of shade canopy out here. It's been done very well, and so have these structures outside the windows. You'll have noticed by now that we have tinted transparent glass and a partially modelled terminal interior. So let's pop inside and take a quick look. So you have some flat textures used to represent shop fronts, and they're pretty crisp and sharp. We have some departure screens and some seating areas in front of the windows. But I would say that this is a terminal that has been designed to be viewed from the outside. If you have a look at the windows, there's a very unusual feature in the reflections from the inside, and that is that the reflected image is of someone flying a light aircraft. Now I have absolutely no idea how that has come about. It's intriguing. So if anyone can shed any light on this in the comments, I'd be very interested to hear. So overall, yes, a good job of the interior modelling, but certainly something that you would be best off looking at from the outside. And from the outside, it looks really very good indeed. This is the main Terminal 2 building, and just like with Pier 4, I'm very impressed with it. Excellent quality modelling, pretty good texturing, decent reflective glass that looks very convincing and is nicely tinted, and we have a similar level of interior modelling to that which we've seen already. The lower level of Terminal 2 doesn't feature any transparent glass or interior modelling. Instead, it features flat PBR textures which reflect the light very convincingly, and in my opinion they are just about high enough resolution to give a convincing impression of some sort of terminal interior. They're certainly not obviously blurry as you're taxiing around, but if you get really close then of course you will notice that they are not super crisp. This texturing here on this concrete is absolutely fantastic. It's nice and sharp even when you do get up close, and I love the details that have gone into the areas that aren't immediately visible, like this shutter over here and the signage under this walkway. Terminal 1 looks very good as well, with a nicely detailed sign and again some more fantastic exterior modelling. This is Pier 3, which extends out from Terminal 1. You'll notice that the jetways here wear Aer Lingus advertising, and it's very nicely done, super crisp textures, and it's really nice to see that MK Studios have taken the trouble to model several different types of custom jetway. There's no transparent glass or interior modelling here, but again, as flat textures go, these are pretty good, and the PBR materials reflect the light quite nicely. Here we have Pier 2, which is a different sort of pier yet again. We have flat window textures, we have a slight graphical anomaly up here where the two textures don't quite match up, but that's not the sort of thing you're likely to notice in day-to-day operation. And one of the things that has really impressed me at this pier is the high quality, high resolution signage. The text looks really very good indeed. And I also like the varying colours of the glass textures. It feels very lifelike to me. Here's some footage of the other side of Pier 2 from slightly further away, which gives you a look at some of the details on the ground. So we have people, which is very nice to see. We have cones, we have air stairs, we have pushback bars, and we've got things like these shelters. And overall, these elements combine to bring a lot of life to the airport. Here we have Pier 1, which is modelled and textured to the same high standard we've seen so far, and like Pier 4, it has transparent glass and a partially modelled interior. Away from the main terminal, we have a number of peripheral buildings which have been modelled and textured to the same high standard as the terminal buildings themselves. Let's take a look at some of the ground textures. Overall, I think these are done very nicely. They're nice and crisp, there's no blurriness even if you get down really close, which is impressive, and the materials used and their colour match the real thing pretty closely. The exception to this is these darker patches, which are almost completely uniform and completely black, and if you have a look at Google satellite imagery, you'll notice that these are much lighter and they're also slightly varying in tone. The ground markings are superb. These lines look just right to me. They are full of imperfections, they're not too bright, and they've got little nicks out of the edges, which I really like to see. So overall, this is a pretty convincing ground surface. I'm a little unsure how I feel about the runway textures. On the one hand, they look pretty realistic. We've got rubber around the touchdown zones, there's the odd small crack here and there, and there's enough colour variation to give the look of a real runway. On the other hand, it doesn't look like the runway in the Google Maps satellite photo. It's too dark, too clean, and the markings don't match. Now, it could be that with all the work that's going on at Dublin Airport, the runway's been resurfaced and repainted since the satellite image was taken. Given the attention to detail elsewhere, I find it hard to believe that MK Studios wouldn't have researched the runway markings and recreated them accurately. The grassy areas around the airport look very nice indeed. The mixture of green and brown tones looks very realistic. It's nice to see the construction work underway on the new North Runway at Dublin Airport, and I hope MK Studios will update the scenery to bring this into use when the real thing is opened. The night lighting here at Dublin is very impressive. The floodlights create a realistic looking glow over the apron, and the light coming through the windows is very convincing as well. The windows retain their tint, which we've seen other developers fail to achieve, so, as I say, I'm very impressed. The areas that have flat textures as opposed to transparent glass look pretty good as well. These are among the better nighttime textures I've seen for windows. And you'll also note that they blend in very nicely. It's not immediately obvious which areas have transparent glass and modelled interiors and which don't. Pier 3 doesn't look quite so good. There's a bit of a mismatch between the textures on some of the edges, and they're not quite as crisp or as realistic as those on the Terminal 2 sides, but I've seen plenty worse. Pier 2 looks somewhat better, and again the flat textures blend in very nicely with the transparent windows and the modelled interior down here. The runways and taxiways are very nicely lit with centerline and edge lights as appropriate, and overall the night environment here is pretty realistic. Here's Dublin in the rain. The ground textures look great. They support the default puddles and ground reflections very nicely. The transparent windows do unfortunately pop out, but as we've discussed to death in previous reviews, there's nothing that the developers can do about this, and hopefully Asobo will fix the problem soon. And here's Dublin in the snow, and I think it looks really pretty good. Obviously, the developers are constrained by some of the limitations in the SDK in terms of which surfaces can support snow and which can't, but within these confines they've done a really good job. The runways are free of snow, the grassy areas have a decent covering, and the apron areas have a thinner covering, and overall this to me looks pretty convincing. So, in conclusion, I think MK Studios have done a great job with this add-on. The buildings are well modelled, the building texturing is pretty good throughout, and the ground textures are nice and crisp. I'm impressed by the tinted transparent glass, which makes the buildings where it's implemented look great both day and night. In fact, the night lighting in general is absolutely fantastic. It's nice to see ground staff on the apron, and there's an impressive amount and variety of clutter. The snow implementation is impressive as well. I have found a couple of things to moan about. Some of the ground textures are a bit too dark and a bit too uniform. There are a few areas where building textures could have done with a bit of tweaking to make them line up properly, and it's a bit of a shame that transparent glass and interior modelling wasn't used for the whole airport. These are very minor points though, and overall this rendition of Dublin feels very realistic to me. I have no hesitation in recommending it. Thanks as always for watching. Don't forget to click the thumbs up button if you found this review helpful, and please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I hope to see you again soon here on Filbert Flies. Take care. Bye bye.